There you go.
Yeah, we're both looking a bit rough today. I think we'll just
Yeah,
put this one on. I think we'll put this one on fucking audio.
I'm not sure we ever look like handsome. It's been a long week. It's been a
What do we
good
say?
week.
It's always relative.
It's all relative, right? How did your presentation go?
It, I wanna nerd out a little bit over that day, but not my presentation itself, but how I managed to squeeze it into 5 minutes and how I practiced for it. And did I memorize it, or did I just get so familiar? Did I just build that relationship with that particular text?
So it's very interesting that you mentioned that because I am balls deep in David Epstein's new book called Inside the Box.
Now, it's David Epstein, right?
I mean, he may also have an island, but I think he uses it for different things. He uses it to write books, and so you already know him even if you've never read him before because he wrote the book called Range, which was about specialization versus not specializing.
hmm
And before that, he wrote
What's his background, Adam? What sports?
um
And in specific?
yes, well, so he started playing football when he was a kid and then had a horrific injury. And then he started running cross country, and that actually took him to college scholarship. And then he became a science writer. So he does have a pretty high level sports background, even if it's not a sport that we necessarily focus on. Um, and and the first book he wrote was called The Sports Gene, which was about the effect of genetics
Mhm.
on athletics, which is that's what drew me in. I was an instant fan because that's a favorite topic of mine. But um, the new book is about constraints, and he's been doing a lot of podcasts, and he was just talking about you know how changing the constraints on how he's written has changed the output of his books. And so changing the constraints on your speech, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whether it's emergent or recorded or different things like that, will change your presentation.
Explain more. What do you mean by changing the constraints on your?
Well, so let's say, oh, hey, here comes Rory. One sec.
All right.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we don't see you though. Oh, wait, maybe. Oh, I see you now. Hey, Ro.
Hi. I'm not sure if this is going to work.
I hear you perfectly. You hear us?
Yeah, can't sit back though. My control my lap. Sorry.
Okay.
I bought one of these new reflex things.
Oh yeah, you're playing with it right now? I can't quite
No,
see.
no, I bought it for my daughter.
What is it?
It's just for the garage when she comes in to gauge how.
So she doesn't crash the
Yeah,
car.
yeah. So little constraint, if you will. But when she comes in, the fridge door, she comes really, really close to it, and I can't get the fridge open. I'm saying, "Is this your way of telling me to stop drinking beer?"
Maybe it's fat shaming.
I would hit that door one or two times. I don't park in a garage. My wife does.
There we go.
Oh,
Anyway,
very nice. Effective. That's an effective constraint.
yeah.
So, uh, Rory, you'll just figure out what we're talking about. So, if I gave you 10 minutes to give that presentation versus 5 minutes to give that presentation, would the quality of the presentation go up or down? And that's the question. Like, if you have 5 minutes, do you chop out half the bullshit, or do you not have enough time to really explain yourself? And so the constraints on your presentation, the constraints on a book, he's talking about how they affect what we would consider self-organization, but how they affect everything. And to me, it's almost an interesting sequel in some ways to Matt Ridley's book on the evolution of everything, because we talk about fundamentals and the rules of sports, and we know if you change the rules of the sport just a little bit, you can change everything about the way that sport self-organizes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I give I was a discouraged isn't the word, but I'm like, this is the culmination of my semester, right? For this, because I'm doing it part time, so I only have one unit, and I'm like, really, I got to cram all this into 5 minutes. So it felt more like a rapping test to wrap myself through it. Um, but I get it. If it made it 10 minutes, I would have waffled for 10 minutes, and if it made it 2 hours, I would have waffled for 2 hours. So I guess it just forced us into this small space. But yeah, that's all I have to say on it. No, no, sorry, excuse me. My point was, uh, I built I built my slide set, and then I made my narration as I went, and then I would just kind of try and talk it into my phone and get the timing and all that down. I must have practiced that and tripped over my dick 100 times just trying to get it down, right? Squeeze it into this 5 minutes. I already have kind of trouble articulating sometimes, and a hum and a haw and a and I put filler words, so I had to really cut all that out. And I was wondering, am I memorizing this, or am I just getting that? That's my question. Or am I just the text, the information of the text itself, and that pattern? Am I just building a relationship, a perception action relationship with that? And I know I'm overthinking it, boys, but that's what we do.
Oh, well, let me ask you a question. If it were someone else's text, then we'd agree that you were memorizing it, right? So if your presentation was to one of Shakespeare's sonnets, would you be you'd be memorizing his words, right?
Correct,
but it's more of a performance. I think then
it's maybe the same thing, Phil. That's what I'm saying. That's my curiosity, which is why I'm even thinking about stuff like this. We're navel gazing again already, but
it's all good.
Are we memorizing it, or are we just building a relationship that particular visual pattern? I don't know.
What do you think? How do you feel?
I'm leaning towards the second one, but it makes me sound like I'm fucking crazy.
So we're talking about the slideshow that we watched the other day, the presentation you gave for your program that you're in.
Correct. So I had to get my whole framework, my skills test, present it, and squeeze that into 5 minutes.
I mean, my question would be,
with a hard cutoff.
Did you have what you were going to say on a piece of paper in front of you?
I had to. Normally I would kind of just riff it, but I had to because I only had 5 minutes. I was getting a cutoff, and I needed to make sure I had like a 15-second buffer. And if I fucked up even a couple of times, and I almost got through it, I think I had the right amount of caffeine and nicotine and night sleep, and I got through it. But I'm just curious as I was writing it because
like a TED talk. So you had to condense it down like a TED talk.
Yeah, something like that.
So I mean, you certainly.
But I wrote it down. I was reading a script, and that. Sorry, now I'm joking. I've had too much caffeine this morning. That's kind of what we were talking about. The difference between prescription and organic. I don't think I can read something and sound natural. It's like uncanny. Some people are good at it, right? Some people can do it. Watch some of these, TV anchors and everything. It just seems flawless. And they're obviously reading from some kind of script or teleprompter, but it sounds natural. I don't think many people can do that. I think it's a really tough skill that takes a lot of time and practice. Certainly, I can't do it. If I'm reading from a script, it's very, very apparent.
Well, there's also like when I do something like that, I don't script it out. I just have some key words, and then it emerges. So it's not, to me, I can't memorize something like that, a presentation. I can't read a script. I have to do it emergently, but I have some cues, if you will.
Right.
And so to me, it does a speech like that I don't know what role memory plays, but I would definitely say that it's a self-organizing thing when I do it. I give a 8-hour basically course on coaching, and my slides are just a couple of cues. And then so it emerges, and every time I give it, it's different because the room is different, the people are different. I'm looking at different faces. I'm different, and so I wonder if you try to do it again without the script, without any cues, without the thing in front of you, what would it look like?
Well, it was tough to take that chance because there was no redos, so I had to go that route. But it was apparent when we were down in Texas here, Adam. You're much better at it than me. I'm fucking talking like I got hot chips in my mouth.
I think a time constraint is also a different constraint when you're pressed for time. That is not the same as you're just being told, "Hey, let's try and keep this between 5 and 10," and then speaking and just having a counter next to you that's just letting you know you're getting a little too long here, you're running out of time there. But it's another, like I said, if you're told like you got to put it in within 5 minutes, then you probably have to because you want to hit your points. You have all these slides, you have to speak about them. I don't think you're given much choice. Adam has 8 hours. That's a lot of hours.
Right. So the question would be, if we gave you 10 minutes, we said, okay, do it again, 10 minutes, would it just be twice as much bullshit?
Oh, definitely.
And so the constraint of 5 minutes is valuable in that sense because it stopped you from adding a lot of bullshit. It made you put it on a napkin.
Yeah.
Interestingly,
the one time I got a little bit derailed, just a little bit because I was really struggling with it. My kids were like, I must have sounded like a madman. I practiced it 200-300 times a day before because it was just a one off, right? And the only time I got kind of derailed is after 4 minutes. He went, "You have 1 minute left." I was like, "Ah, fuck." He kind of he perturbed me, if you will. He just kind of gave me a little push as I was in my flow. But anyway, I got it done.
I get it. I have to do a presentation for the conference we're going to in June. It's my choice how I want to do it, but I would like to do a floating head also for the presentation. And for me, the best chance of me doing it well would be to not practice it at all. I will do my slides. I will have Rory and you look at the slides. If the slides are good, then I will just do a one take through, and that'll probably be as good as I'll ever get it.
How long do you have?
I don't have a hard time constraint necessarily, but I think that, 15, 20 minutes will be plenty, if not too much.
I think if I remember last time there was some kind of on the spot. They just give you 2 minutes to riff and give you a topic. So there's a bit of that going on too, I think.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are 4 parts. One of the parts was recording a practice. And so talk about this. As soon as a camera goes on me, I fall apart. I start fucking talking too much. I sound like an idiot. I start saying things and forgetting things because I don't plan my practice. And so as soon as the camera was on me, it was like a tremendous amount of pressure. And I think the guy said it was a good practice, but I'm sure I sounded like a moron. So I handed that in already. Now I have a slide presentation that I have to hand in before. And then there are 2 sections that will just be off the cuff, like you're saying.
That's that spotlight effect, right? When the camera comes out.
Yeah. And if they start filming me for my sessions, then I'll just fall apart.
Here, is the Chimaev Strickland fight still on?
I mean, did he hurt him with that stupid kick yesterday?
Well, I was just pulled up my phone when I was leaving the gym last night and it said he blew his ACL and then I couldn't find that again. I thought that was just bullshit.
That had to be bullshit.
I heard someone said he said something popped,
Jesus
but
Christ.
I haven't seen that or anything like that. And I think even if he got hurt, he would still probably fight. That would be
so stupid.
It is so stupid. It's so stupid that Chimaev doesn't understand that this is a fucking game.
From a skills perspective, I'm a big Sean Strickland.
I know you are, and you shouldn't be. You shouldn't be.
From a skills perspective,
you're a fan because the way he trains.
Well, there's that, but excuse me.
Okay, fair enough.
I think he's got. Careful what I'm saying here, because I think they're all great fighters, right? I never want to shit on fighters. It's not my intention. I think he's got a limited skill set, but I think he's very, very good at that. And I think
so what is his
Strickland trains, if he maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, I'm not privy to it. If he had a coach that was nudging him into new spaces, I think he would get a lot more out of the different environments and all the live work that he gets. But I think what he is good at, I mean, he's just got a beautiful relationship with range and taking the sting off the punches.
So you say limited skill set, right? But in MMA, he's limited, period. Because he can throw straight punches with very little power. He throws a front kick, right? He doesn't wrestle. He doesn't clinch. He doesn't do anything on or off the cage. He doesn't do anything on or off the ground. So to me, limited is not even enough.
Well, it's been enough to get him to where he is, Adam.
No, I mean, limited's not even enough to define him.
Oh.
And yes, we never see video of all these travels of him actually wrestling or grappling these people or doing cage work. A little video came out this week of him doing some clinch work with another lower level UFC guy, and it didn't look good at all.
I wonder how much of that is on purpose. That's not the word I was looking for, but that's the only word coming in my head. But how much of
What
that
do you mean?
You're not seeing it because he doesn't want you to see it. He's playing a part because he does play the heel. I mean, the words and things that come out of his mouth are absurd. And
I don't think he's playing.
So then if he's not playing, then that's his character. That is who he is.
Yes.
Are you not? Is his social media being cultivated in such a way that you don't get to see that because he doesn't want you to? And that could either be because it's not good or because
I'm not sure it's cultivated at all.
So
he puts up all this. The reason Scotty fell in like with him to begin with is because he seems to do most of his training by sparring different people.
And he looks good when he's on his feet, for sure.
But all that video is kickboxing. None of it is shoot boxing. None of it is clinch, cage, ground.
No. It's definitely not.
So,
And he's gonna have to do a lot of running away to not be put on a cage and be taken down and wrestle fucked for, is it a
all right, so
25-minute fight?
make your predictions then,
Is it
Scotty.
a 25-minute fight, right?
Yeah, make your predictions.
Wrestle
Yeah,
fucked.
I think Chimaev runs through him, and I'm not saying that's the result I want, but I think they already know. I think when guys have trained with each other, they all know. There's a pecking order in the gym, and it's often unspoken about. And yes, fights can go either way, but I think they know.
It's funny you say that, and I'm not going to name names, but we used to have a room full of smaller guys who were all very high level. There was a period where we had a room full of guys under 170, and everyone in that room fought in something big if they wanted to. And there was a little bit of like a big brother thing, I think, that occurs where guys sort of, the pecking order is not completely based on skill, but some of it is based on where they just sort of feel they are, if that makes sense. And if they didn't know each other and we put them in the cage to fight, the results may be different than when they train together in the room, if that makes sense.
No, I don't disagree. I'm not making any definitive statement here. I just think
Oh, no, I
generally,
know.
yeah. I think they probably, I mean, I know for the most part exactly where I stand in the room,
Yes,
in my room,
I think right. But we are older and experienced enough that we know where we stand skill-wise.
Right.
There's no one in the room who has it over me or you or Rory because there's a mental component to it. Like, well, maybe I have that with Rory, but there's no one in the room is big brothering us, except for me and Rory. But I wonder how much. So, like, does Chimaev have that over Strickland as well? Like, has Chimaev shown Strickland how strong he is, how tough he is, that he's just a different breed, and Strickland has no chance?
I would imagine, given what I see, and again, I don't know these guys, but their kind of characters and their dispositions, I think they've probably had quite a few ego rounds.
I don't know how much training have they done together.
I was getting confused because I thought this was a rematch, but no, it was Pereira Strickland fought, and then they ended up training together. Is that correct?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
But there was some footage of Chimaev and Strickland doing some kickboxing
Yeah,
training.
it looked like no one landed a thing, and Chimaev was just moving around, and Strickland was just moving. Like so, what that doesn't give me any extra information. Now, other people in that room, they might know how the rest of those minutes went, but that minute of clip didn't tell me anything. I'm going to go with Chimaev only because I don't see, and I haven't seen, so I can only go with what we've seen. And that's to say we haven't seen anything to show me what Strickland's cage work is like, what his wrestling defense is going to look like. And has anyone stopped Chimaev from taking him down and wrestle fucking them?
Burns the closest, and Burns in the clinch and ground is a totally different thing than Strickland.
I mean, as far as we know, because we haven't seen anything.
No, but I mean, Burns' credentials as a grappler are,
sure.
are world-class level.
Yes. So Chimaev went 25 minutes with Zadrikis, right?
Yeah, and that was a terrible fight.
He laid on top of him 25 minutes though, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was pure wrestle fuck.
Now, the only thing I would consider is if Strickland just had a tremendous gas tank that he did really well with a pin versus bounce type game, stayed in the middle and was able to turn and hand fight, put his back and just wore Chimaev out on the takedown aspects of it. But I mean, even Drickus couldn't get off his back.
He'll be.
We watch fights differently because I appreciated that performance.
Whose performance?
Against Drickus. It was like
whose performance did you appreciate?
Chimaev's.
I did not.
But what I'm saying, I can expect. It felt like a cat playing with a ball of yarn.
Yes, but that's not. I want to see the cat kill the mouse.
No, I know you want to see a cat kill the mouse. I'm talking about expressions of skill, which are
okay. But I don't see if we are agreeing that the fundamentals or the rules of the sport and the win conditions of the sport are first and foremost damage. That's how you win on the scorecards, and damage that leads to a stoppage. Chimaev never tried to damage or stop. And so playing with a ball of yarn is not what the part of the rule set. It's not part of the win conditions. It's just, so to me, skillful would have been trying to finish, trying to get into a better position, advanced position, ground and pound, submit, knock him out. He didn't do any of that. Elbow him, cut him, whatever it is. He didn't do any of that.
Why do you not think he did it? Why do you not think he did that?
Well, because it's a fight, and he did not want to let Dricus stand up. But Dricus couldn't stand up because Chimaev wasn't doing anything, and it created this fight that I think was less than impressive for both of them.
A fight to not lose as opposed to a fight to win. You had 25 minutes on top of someone. It should not have. They should have been 10-8 rounds. Like if you can
Exactly.
completely dominate another human being from the top position, then you should be hitting and elbowing and hitting, controlling, hitting, controlling. Like if that level is so far is much higher, then that's how that should have went. And yeah, I mean, he was on top and he controlled, but I mean, show that you are
I think,
capable of doing
yeah,
damage.
I think I really appreciate the control side. I don't watch grappling because I don't particularly enjoy it. It doesn't move any in my pants. But when I watch MMA grappling, I appreciate that because in MMA grappling, the whole point is the controlling. In general grappling, you can have a bottom game and you can very much be in the fight, and that could be your style and your game and whatnot. In MMA, you're not meant to be on the bottom. So the fact that you're forced to be on the bottom for 25 minutes, I can appreciate that because it's where I want to take my room, like top control and domination. So I always said I enjoy the control part, even if he's not finishing the fight. So the same reason I like watching Makhachev and that.
I'm not judging whether he finished the fight or not. My judgment is based on him not. It might as well have been a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or wrestling tournament because he was just using one aspect of MMA, which is the control, but it's control to finish. And the fact that he never tried to, a couple times, he did a little bit of Kimura, he did a little, but he has all these tools. He has punches, he has elbows, he can knee the body, he can submit, he can advance position. He never did any of those.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, let's say he did that in the first round and DDP gets up. And so now he changes his strategy to just hold him down. Okay, that's fine, but he never even. And so to me, it was a too cautious. And as a fan or even a coach, I don't want my fighters to have 10-9 rounds and take the risk every time they stand up and have a new exchange on the feet. There's a risk that they're going to get finished. So I want my fighters to take people down, and when you pin, you win. Because the longer the fight goes, the more risk there is of everything happening. And fighting not to lose or fighting not to lose position, to me, it's not the right way to approach it.
That's all very fair. You speak about Shakur Stevenson, and he's purist like him because he's not knocking anyone out, but his skill set is picking apart and staying safe and in and out and whatnot, right? But you can make a similar argument. He's not going for the kill. Why is he giving his opponents the opportunity to go round after round after round and maybe knock him out? So I think it's
sure. I think it's fair, but Shakur Stevens also knows the limitations of his own power. I mean, Shakur Stevens, you rarely even see him land something that wobbles another person. He's just not a power puncher. Mayweather had to do that in all the late fights of his career, the last 20 fights of his career. That's what he did.
Well, Mayweather's another one. There's a lot of maybe people who are, no, I wouldn't consider myself a boxing purist by any means, but, I enjoy it. I understand the sport. I love watching Mayweather. I think it's just a tremendous expression of skill. But a lot of the people said towards the end of his career and stuff, his fights were kind of boring, right? They were cautious. They were clever. They were intelligent, and I can appreciate that.
There's a constraint on the system with Mayweather, and that was his hands. He had bad hands.
Kind of hands, right?
His hands were always sore. They were always damaged. To hit hand pads, he put on a pro wrap. And so you look at his early fights in his career before his hands really started bothering him. He had some power, but later in his career, I think he made the assessment to not risk his hands.
So maybe we give Chimaev the benefit of the doubt and say if he can do the same to Strickland, take him down, control him, and then actually put some effort into trying to finish him, whether that's because emotionally he wants to murder him, but he actually puts forth an effort to finish the fight as opposed to just lay on him for 25 minutes, then we come back and have this discussion afterwards and say, okay, the fact that he showed that he could do this and then did it, maybe we give him a pass. He was fighting for the belt to win that. Maybe there was maybe in his head he's like, I don't want to risk losing this opportunity to become the middleweight champ. So he did play it safe. In his head, he knows he played it safe. He might not say that, and that's fine. But now he's got a chance to defend and show us what it means to be champ, that it's not just about playing it safe. It is about putting forth this effort to finish in a dominant stoppage fashion. I mean, say, okay, well, this guy's also one of the best in the UFC. Challenging, was a champ, right? Didn't Strickland have the belt for a moment, right?
Yep.
And now, he showed that he could, as a champ, he could take out a former champ and not just wrestle hump him for 25 minutes.
All right, I'll grant you that.
I'll grant you that. It's tomorrow night, right?
Tomorrow night. The co-main, the other title fight is the really exciting one. That's the really exciting one because Josh Van, my gym has been watching Josh Van since even before he got in the UFC. By the time he got in the UFC, the guys already knew him because I have a young pro who is also from Burma or Myanmar or whatever we call it now politically. So, we've all been turned on to him and been a fan of his for a long time. I hate the way that he won. For him, I hate the way that he won the title, but I think he can really cement himself. And the Japanese fighter he's fighting is very skilled in the places that we don't know if Van is skilled at yet. He's very good with his reactive takedowns. He's very good with jumping on the back. He blew that dude's knee out from standing back control. So that should be a really interesting fight. And I think, I love the speed of those guys. I love what they're able to do. Maybe part of my dislike of Strickland is just the gear he fights in is just very boring to me.
You mentioned blowing the knee out there. And there's obviously there's stuff we don't do in practice. I would assume most coaches don't do in practice, oblique kicks and whatnot. Does it surprise you, or do you think there's there's some honor or an ethic in it that fighters aren't? You'll be able to speak to this more, Rory. Like more intentionally trying to take out their opponent's front leg, like specifically targeting the front knee. Do you think that's what do you think is going on there that we don't see more intentionality around that in fights? And we do is like the oblique kicks, like really trying to go right through the knee and really damage the front wheel of your opponent. Do you think there's a little bit of an unspoken rule in fighting that we don't do that as a fighter, Rory?
I thought it was illegal for a very long time. I thought directly attacking in front of the knee was illegal, and I'm still not even 100% sure that it's not illegal. So, but
maybe I don't know. Adam, is it? I thought oblique. I mean, Jones used to use them and utilize them.
And I was just studying to do my presentation. I was just studying some Conor film, and one of the clips that I picked up when he fought Diaz the first time is he tries to stomp right on Diaz's knee and lands it pretty well. So maybe you can't directly attack the kneecap, but you can hyperextend their leg.
And then maybe you don't see it because it is something that is very difficult to train in the room. I mean, we had a guy who came to us and had only spent a couple weeks with us after leaving a different gym. He came to train with us and was getting ready for this fight and fought on a car with a bunch of other guys in Athens. And the other guy came out immediately, like a jumping kick straight to his knee. Our guy ends up winning the fight and then ends up being out for 9 or 10 months. So
ACL.
With an ACL tear. So I think maybe because we don't train it, because again, how do you train that without hurting somebody? That it might not be top of mind, so you don't see it as much, but it seems that it's just right there. And I mean, as a fighter, fighters don't want to do that. I don't know. We'd have to ask, hey, why aren't you just kicking dudes directly in the knee? I'm not sure. I really haven't given any thought to know, is that something that I would or wouldn't do? I'm so far removed from fighting. So, 2009.
It brings up some good points. After Tara, is that his name? The guy fighting Van, after he did that back attack from standing, we came into the gym on Tuesday night and I was like, none of you motherfuckers better be trying this. And they knew, it was a joke, but we've seen some other things. There was one back take from Quad Pod that we all saw once where we were all just how did it not result in injury? And, we make this agreement that we're not going to experiment with certain things on each other. But after practice the other day, a couple of guys were talking about how in competition, they've pulled things off that they've never practiced before. And the reason they've never practiced them before is because they don't want to hurt their training partners. But in the competition, they didn't have that kind of standard of care. Not that they were trying to hurt someone else, but they didn't care. Like in our room, one of the wrestling rules is you don't use your body weight to make someone else fall because there's a chance of injury there. There's a good chance of injury. But in a fight, you wouldn't be thinking about that. And so if you haven't trained it, I don't know if it comes out readily, like Rory said, but it might. And I think, and Scotty, we've talked about this, Rory, we've talked about this. I think there are things that are safer when everyone is going full speed than they are when we have scaled down in the intensity. Because everyone's version of scaled down intensity is not the same. And so when I watch my guys in their MMA rounds, like it scares me. Like I don't want to see some of the exchanges and some of the scrambles and things, but because they're both going at the same pace and intensity and they're well matched, it seems like we have less risk of injury. But in practice, some of those same things, or in lower intensity training, some of those same things we see being injurious.
Well, that's one of the two core problems in our training rooms, right? It's the for me, it's the head and the knees.
Yes, it's the head and the knees and the neck to me.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, I would put neck and head together. Well, in the brain, of course. Yeah. And you have to practice the scrambles because you organize more effectively over time. And I'm like you. I'm kind of cringing throughout the whole practice, and then it's a sigh of relief when we get to the end. It's not because the practices are reckless, but we're doing a lot of scrambling, a lot of takedowns, a lot of wrestling, and it's the only time I lose my shit if it's malicious. So again, I think these little quips are helpful. I talk about, I want them to be aggressive but not reckless, and I'm just there ready to bark very, very loudly if I see them getting into, because it's the torque and takedowns, like you said, when they're falling back and trying to rotate their partner over their legs and stuff. That's really where the 90% of these knee injuries are coming from.
One of the things I've been saying when I'm coaching is, there's a saying that your freedom of speech ends at the tip of my nose. Well, something I've been preaching is your creativity ends at my safety. And so be as creative as you can be in solving these problems, but I do want you to take into account your partner's safety as strongly as your own, choices. And I know we're talking perception, action, decision making, and whatnot, but I think it makes sense, like to not try something totally dumb on a training partner's knees.
See that this is interesting. You mentioned creativity there, right? So I usually finish our striking classes where I call them just fuck around rounds, right? Creativity, just play. I want to see cartwheel kicks, tornado kicks. I don't even really want you making contact so much, but it should look almost like capoeira, right? I just want you to explore movement in that. Some guys, I'm not saying that they look better than others. Some are just not comfortable being that creative or looking kind of silly and whatnot. So I'm trying to kind of foster a little bit of that too. Like, no one gives a fuck what you look like here. Just play, just flow. Try your spinning shit. Try all that. Because if we keep doing that at the end of practice, then you never know. It's maybe going to start expressing itself in your fights. But some are better than others.
And then I think the most important aspect of that is being in a room. We say being comfortable, being uncomfortable, being in a room where you can explore and try and be creative and not suffer intense consequences. I mean, that clip just went back through the rounds. I forget who it was, but someone's sparring and kind of
Kevin Lee.
Right. Yeah. Throws what didn't even, when you look at it, didn't even look like a big deal. He just kind of threw this jumping knee.
Yeah.
It's like
it was never going to land.
No, it's like almost directly in his own space.
Yeah.
And then lands and gets dropped. And like, you can't be in a room. And we have guys who have left other places recently and come to train with us. And one of the things that when I talk to a person who's coming in, who's had some amateur fights, wants to go pro in the future, and I give them the whole spiel about how we do things and what we expect from them as a student and then as a pro. And it's like, we want to create an environment where you can 90% of the time you can explore and have fun and maybe make a mistake or two, and the consequences aren't dire. Because if you're in a room where it's eat or be eaten, then all you will ever play is your most safe A game. You will be very worried about what happens if you make a mistake. You'll be very worried about all of the other things that prevent you from exploring and getting better. Because if I try something new and I get cracked, well, I don't want that consequence. And so I
Well,
like how you play in a room like that, Scotty, but there's so many rooms out there that don't allow for any of that. And I think it's so stifling on
well,
people's growth.
it's not that they don't allow for it. It's that it rolls downhill. And so you are creative and beat up somebody who's less skilled than you are. And then they beat up and are creative with someone they're less skilled than. I mean, they're more skilled than. And so it rolls downhill. But yes, you'd want to be able to work with a guy at your level and have an opportunity to be creative with them. But what happens in most rooms is your ability to be creative and play a B game and try different things is on the back of somebody else who's not as skilled as you are. They're your meat, if you will. And then what happens is you beat people out of the sport. I've always said that especially in a striking sport, in most places there is almost no value for a less skilled person to be real sparring someone more skilled than them in striking. Now, if the person who's more skilled than them is there to work with the other person, it's different. But in competitive sparring, then the person who's less skilled is just there to get beat up.
For sure.
That's go back to Mayweather, like the videos that come out of his rounds getting ready for fights. All those rounds almost ended with the other guy basically giving up or getting wobbled, and then they replace him with somebody else.
That's a strange psychology. I've always been fascinated with that. The kind of paid sparring partners. That's your job. You go in and take a whipping. Or the journeyman. Yeah. Man, I'd rather stuck cock in a dark alley than getting my ass handed to me every day for a few $100.
I don't know why you can't do both.
Yeah, I could probably do both.
Seriously, don't be so suburban.
Right, you do one during the day and one as your night job.
Gas prices keep going up. Maybe I'll need to.
You might.
We should all have electric vehicles.
Take a shot of mouth to get a few hundred miles down the road.
Got to get it tested.
So I made, and I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about that specifically, but I made that post yesterday because I was thinking, Adam, about we're all saying doing the thing, and I think my point was, and I don't know if it gets lost, because when you water it down and try and maybe talk and kind of every man speak, it can get, some of the meaning can get lost. But it was occurring to me so two things, that as long as we're kind of doing the thing, I think it's always defensible, right? Because I think every coach thinks we get better at what we do, right? But it also occurred to me, and I was trying to be a bit more critical of myself, is that we just assume because we're doing the fighty things and we're doing the thing that we're learning. But that's maybe a stretch too. And I'm wondering, even if we're playing the eco games or the live games and whatever, there can be a lot of just going through the motions. I use the kind of analogy to the kids all the time, that if you're coming to the gym every day and doing 3 sets of 10 at the same weight constantly, you're not going to make much progress. So I think it's really important that these games stretch the players into a discomfort zone, or just towards the end of a challenge. But I think that comes from the individual, and I'm sure you see this a lot in your room. There's athletes that really engage in the brief. They really, really engage, and then there's some that just go through the motions. And I think you can see over time who's developing quicker, because we're not really. I mean, yes, we're winging it for a lot of the time, but we're not just pulling these games out of our arse either. There's generally a space to develop in these games, and I wondered if you're curious about that. Do you see that in your room, that some are just more engaged and really working the game? And I'm not sure how to really get everyone to do that all the time. But then, because I can't get them to do it, I'm like, I can only remind them, you can't make someone curious, and you really can't make someone get the most out of the game. That has to come from them, I think. And obviously their partner, they've got to be a good, they have to be jiving.
And so my 2 cents on that is, one, the variability of having different partners will hopefully not allow them to just cruise through. Right. Because there will be partners that force them to play the whatever that game is. And so your variability that's built into your room and partners and things over time hopefully does some of that. And like we started this conversation, that is where I think the use of constraints is the value. The whole thesis of Epstein's book, I believe, is that unconstrained freedom does not lead to the best outcomes. And he talks about this company I had never even heard of that's had all the money, all the backing, all the brain power, called General Magic. And they set out to make the first iPhone, it sounds like. They set out to make the first usable handheld devices and stuff, and they failed miserably. But everyone that went from that company ended up being very important at other tech companies in the future. But General Magic, this first company, it was completely unconstrained. And so the ideas went wild. The time they spent on certain projects wasted a tremendous amount of time, money, resources. And I think if we can constrain them, and maybe that's where individual constraints or using the CLA on individuals is more effective, but I believe we probably walk around the room and try and do some of that as well as for the group. But I think proper game design is probably part of the answer, proper scaling, right? Isn't that part of our framework? Scaling. So I think scaling is connected to the creativity.
Yeah,
Also,
I don't disagree with that, but I think it's part of it. The other part has to come from the athlete being engaged, and
Right.
we can only engage them through, like, again, it's going back to, if I have to intrinsically motivate them, if it's me that has to motivate them to do that, then it's going to be a challenge.
Yes.
How do we get that motivation from within? And there's a bunch of research to say how you best foster intrinsic motivation, right? That you give people a sense of autonomy, a sense of competency, a sense of belonging. But even then, it's still up to the person.
Right. But when I make a list of the reasons that the issues I have with our approach, the reasons our approach is difficult, two of the first reasons that pop up are that adults get creativity beat out of them most of their lives.
Right. That was my point. That was the point in my class, right? Some are like just uncomfortable trying to spin and kick or a Superman punch or anything because it feels silly.
Either it feels silly or they never even consider to spin or do a Superman punch or to go right instead of left because the safe way has been trained into them. They've been spoon-fed and prescribed everything for so long that it's hard for them. And I think that's generally the case with adults. And stubbornness is the other one, right? You'll see a guy just making the same mistake over and over, eating an overhand right over and over because they try and defend the double jab cross the same way. And you're watching them get hit with this over and over. And you're like, Jesus Christ, like, why are you so stubborn? And so those two things work hard against us.
I think also there's the idea that those that are progressing faster or with this method better are more intentional with what they're trying to accomplish. I know that's something that I heard Adam talking about, although I wasn't there for the entirety of class, but speaking about, have an intention for this round, sort of know what you're doing here as opposed to just going through the motions. And then I think the other aspect of people who perform better or who get better faster is that they are more willing to play the game with the rules that are presented, because we talk about the rules create the game, as opposed to just trying to win for the sake of winning. So you set up some tasks that you want them to really deal with in this game, and if they stick to the task, and if we set it up as we believe that if they stick to the task, that parts of their game will grow that can then be put into the whole game. That the ones that are willing to try and win with the rules and focus on the tasks that are presented are the ones that will get more creative in their ways to solve problems. And I think some people, again, we're all different. 8 billion, right? We're all going to be a little different. That not everyone is willing to constrain themselves the way that we're asking them to constrain themselves. And that's where we have to go around the room from time to time and point someone out and say, hey, I see you're passing a guard, but I haven't seen you try and pass the guard in this way or to try and solve passing the guard or things.
So willing and able.
Sure. It's always going to be
scaling.
Yeah, for sure.
So then let me ask you a question, Scotty. So let's say that there was something to prescriptive information processing methodology, ignoring how it would work. Are there some people that need that? Like, are there some people who need much, much more direction, whatever we call it, whatever it looks like?
I think absolutely there is.
So
I don't think that necessarily. I can't make the leap from that to say there's different. What's actually happening, what's actually causing learning.
Yeah,
I know you're not making that leap.
Okay, I just want to be clear. Yeah, so, I'm not. I'm just saying, are there people who need their hand held a lot more than other people? How's that?
No, so absolutely. But I think the solution for me is, rather than holding their hand, is to try and get them comfortable without the hand holding. And maybe you have to go meet them a little halfway, and maybe I'm not all that good at that. I've heard this before. when people are saying if ask coach or coach will just tell you figure it out or whatever. And it's not quite that, but I like to have a conversation when someone comes and asks. I say, well, what do you think's going wrong? Let's think about this.
Right.
But that's hard in the moment. You can't stop the class and have a fucking,
Right.
Socratic interview with your student for 20 minutes. But this is often conversations we'll have at the end of the class.
Right.
I also think that not everyone truly understands how people learn. So there are certain people that think that might think they need to be told more than maybe we tell them. So, for instance, had a student who said,
have a good day.
Said you would once show them, we worked on a head and arm in class, and you would show that, one of the ways to work the head and arm to get the arm next to the shoulder or the shoulder next to the neck was to walk your fingers up the mat. And he has been doing that with great success, and it's because you showed it to him. And I said, okay, it is fair to say that Adam showed you something, but let's just not miss the forest for the trees here. You have also now, for a very long time, been working to finish people with head and arms. And he said, yeah, it's one of my go-to moves. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Every time you had an arm choke, do you walk your fingers up the mat to put the shoulder near the neck? Or have you now just really internalized that I've got to put the shoulder near the neck, and you are actively pursuing this head and arm choke? And while we were in a tournament, while he was saying that, he needed that instruction, his wife was armbarring a girl who was outweighed her by 20 pounds from the guard when his wife had never really been shown, put your foot here, turn here. She wasn't ever fed an armbar from guard. She might have done some rounds where she started in an armbar from guard and we backed out a little bit, but her armbar was like yoga-ish, and then the leg came up, and then she threw the girl over onto her back and finished an armbar. And I'm like, your wife has never really shown how to do an armbar, but she has been presented with scenarios in a sense that she's had to learn on her own how to find that end position. And now she's finishing girls that outweigh her by 20 pounds with arm bars.
And here's the thing. When that person asked me that question, like, I didn't walk up to that person and say, do this. That person had been, first off, very good on top and was already very close to and has been getting that choke already. So when I shared what I like to do, and I probably shared it by doing it to them first, when I shared what I like to do, they already had a context for that thing. And so it was easy to understand. We didn't do reps of it. I just said, I like to walk my fingers up. That's all I did. And if it's that fucking simple, I'm happy to do that for everybody, but it's not that simple for most things. And it's not that simple for everybody. All right, gentlemen, you keep going. I have to go back somewhere. I have to go back to the science factory.
Last question just before you go. So I think we need to get, and I've certainly had to do it, right? From where I used to perhaps practice, but I think we'll have to be really comfortable as coaches of saying, I really don't care if the outcome that you got was even close to what we're looking for. Are we navigating towards it? Are we making any meaningful progress towards it? One of my students very kindly made me, maybe saw I made a wee reel the other week, made me these 3D printed tokens, and they're all the different. There was positional ones and there was submission ones, right? And I put them all in a bucket. They're nice little primal tokens, and I just set the clock, and they come in and they ruffle around the bucket, and they'll pick one out. And it might be a left leg sub, or it might be a RNC or whatever. And it's all different levels in the room. I say, right, go. But if your token's a left leg submission, I don't need to be seeing your mechanics for finishing the leg. I want to just see that you're making meaningful progress, or somewhere during the round you're making you're navigating towards getting a hold of that leg somehow. That's enough for me at that stage, because I just know it's a long process.
That's what Roy was saying before. Is like learning in this methodology. The most important things are intentionality and task focus. And it doesn't matter if you are successful with that task focus. It matters that we see you trying it. We see you moving towards that. And maybe that's part of how we have to redefine what success and failure is. And it can't be 70% for us, but it is very nebulous. Like, how do you quantify that you are task focused? How do you quantify, were you task focused 70% of the time? It's very difficult to do. But maybe we have to redefine success and failure for people. All right, I got to go. I love you guys.
All right. Talk to you later.
Keep going.
Lame. Working for the man.
Fucking job's worth.
Fucking working for the man.
He's got all the money, but
what's that?
But he'll have all the money, but
he does make some money. I get it. Got to do it. Got to pay the bills. Got to put your daughter through expensive college. Go work for the man.
So
No,
you got anything coming up with the team?
let's see. Well, we got an in-house Gorilla Cup. So we've got our nonprofit, our Metal Monkeys Booster Club, our 501c3. So after I'm done hanging out with you for a little bit, I'm going to go put some brackets together. This time around, it's just a small group of kids. It ended up being smaller, and I'm sure that's possibly because graduation is this weekend and Mother's Day is Sunday, although I'm not sure how Mother's Day on Sunday affects people on Saturday. So we got that going on, raise some money for our nonprofit, which helps our kids and adults go and do some competing. And it's just a great day having the parents come in. I look at it like a recital, most things that your kids do. If it's the arts and stuff, well, you go and you watch them play piano on stage, or if it plays, acting and singing and dancing and things of that nature. And if it's sports, you get to go watch your kid play sports. If we don't do these things in-house, then all the parents are doing is coming watching their kids grapple, but they never get to see them perform. So we do this twice a year. So not as many as I wanted, unfortunately, but still I present the opportunities and kids take them or adults take them and we make the most of it. So that's tomorrow. And then on the 30th, we've got Alex in his second pro fight. Creek, one of my amateurs, he has since fought a couple pretty high, not high level, but mostly wrestlers. And this guy's fighting is in a little slightly smaller cage, is a striker known as a boxer. And so we'll see how that goes. And then one of my not newer, but came to us with some background. He's fighting a Muay Thai fight in the cage. So we've got one pro, one novice amateur. This will be his third fight, so it's still considered novice. There's no striking on the ground yet, to the face at least. It's all, all the striking on the feet except knees to the face. And then on the ground, it's just to the body. And then a Muay Thai fight. So that's coming up on the 30th. So that's been a focus for the last couple of weeks, with the Tuesday night training. They warm up. Adam gives them, sometimes he gives them some ideas of how he wants them to warm up. Hey, I'd like to do a stand-up, a clinch in the ground round, or whatever it may be. Then as it gets a little closer, it's like, hey, you got 30 minutes. Warm up. Grab your training partner, warm up, and then we'll do, 3 threes for my amateur, 3 twos for the tie, and then 3 fives. So there's a lot of timers going on Tuesday. Just everybody kind of doing their own thing. And then the guys who aren't fighting, they're either training partners for the guys that are doing their rounds, or they're just like, hey, just here's the round. There'll be 3-minute rounds. I got the 3-minute round. Coach Blackman's got the 5-minute round. Someone puts a clock on for Ian for the 2-minute rounds for his Thai boxing, and just grab a partner and and go and get good work, and then just trying to keep eyes on everybody. So that's basically what's happening with the adults at the Gorilla Cup, and then I'm trying to find something to take my comp team kids to for some jujitsu, maybe either in June or July. So yeah, and then but a bunch of kids graduating tomorrow and moving away, which is always the hardest part about having a martial arts academy in Athens, Georgia, is that these kids come, they become an important part of your lives. They spend 2, 3, 4 more years with you, and then a lot of them end up going away and becoming adults. So you both deal with the loss of people leaving that you really have enjoyed having around and care about. And then you try and look at the bright side of that, is that you got to affect the lives of young men and women and hopefully be a positive influence on them during very formative years of their life. But it never makes it any easier when the people like you really like end up leaving you. And sometimes you see them again and sometimes you don't. And, you just, you hope that you sent them off better than when they came.
Yeah, and it's one of the most reassuring things when people leave for all kinds of reasons, but when they inevitably come back or they come back to visit and whatnot, it's really nice. I want to ask you something, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but you were a UFC company man and a fighter and whatnot. I'm curious if you've got your brother would, I'm sure, have some very strong opinions, but where MMA is going just now, the kind of UFC monopoly, the way they're matching fights, just the business, the kind of business side of fighting. You must have feelings on that after being in with the company.
I can only hope, you used to see the numbers and I haven't really seen the numbers like we used to get the pay because it was something that was public, so-and-so made this much money, show and win, or took home this much money type of thing. I can only hope that people are making more money because there seems to be a lot of shows and a lot of opportunity, but you don't see a lot of people fighting a lot. And it is difficult to fight to fight at a professional level and that be the only thing that you do. Back in the day, I'll use Brian as an example. It wasn't until maybe his last few fights where he didn't have a job and all he did was train to compete. He was working for Pepsi, went around and stocked shelves and things of that nature, but had a full-time job, had health insurance and whatnot. Uh, I think those things are super important. And early on, if you're not making a lot of money, then you have to do that. You have to have a job, you have to have health insurance. The UFC only takes care of you if you get hurt while you're on contract, which is nice because that was something newer. That is something that's been newer. So at least you know that if you're competing, getting ready for a fight, that if you get hurt, you will at least be taken care of. It allows you to put your all into your training. But back in the day, that wasn't necessarily the case. So I can only hope these guys and girls are making more money because many of them are paying 10 to 20% for a coach, 10 to 20% for a manager. And if that's 20 to 40% for every dollar you make, and then you lose, that's, you're not making a lot of money. So my thoughts are just, I hope they're being well taken care of. I like that the bonus structure has increased, but I don't know. I don't know for certain. I don't have anybody there right now. And it's not something I talked to Forrest about really, because he certainly doesn't have any control over that either. I wish there were more high level opportunities that it wasn't, I'm not going to go so far as call it a monopoly because other people could certainly start their own and others have tried. And I don't think it's because the UFC is a monopoly that these other promotions have not fared well. Just think it takes a lot of money. It takes having your own production company, right? That's something that people didn't really know about the UFC. When they did pay-per-views, it's their production company. They might have paid for whatever you pay pay-per-view to have the rights to a stream, but they're doing it's them marketing it all. It's them filming it all. It's them doing all the things. I mean, it takes a lot. There's a reason why it was bought for $4 billion. It's a big time company, but other people could do it if they could find their own Middle Eastern, I guess, to come in and be a part of it and put up all that cash and not really care about losing a lot of it in the beginning. Running a show and doing all that is very expensive. I was part of that many, many years ago with a company and, they lost a lot of money and I just don't think they were willing to continue to lose money. You've got to show someone you're going to lose a lot of money and then maybe you'll break even and then you might make some money. And there's not a lot of folks out there who just want to drop millions of dollars to compete. I wish there were, and there were more opportunities of high level opportunities for guys to get on TV, to make money fighting, to put their bodies on the line. We don't feel as bad about football players and whatnot putting their bodies on the line and the CTE that many of them will inevitably have because they're being paid millions and millions of dollars. They're going into this knowing that this is what the outcome could be if you're in the league for many years. But if you do all the rest of this like you're supposed to financially, then you're not going to have any worries. You'll have generational wealth. But even that generational wealth is only for a handful of guys who are at the highest levels of those sports. So if you go into this, you just need to know, like, it may or may not work out and you may or may not make a lot of money and you need to have an exit strategy. So for us, for my pros, they are students at my martial arts academy. They pay a monthly membership and that is it. And when we talk about guys who want to come in and want to fight pro, I'm like, hey, I don't take money. There's no coaching fee here. You're going to pay a monthly membership. There's no, I'm not your manager. So, go get management, but just know that you'll pay them between 10 and 20%. And regardless of what you do, they're going to take their piece because once you sign that contract, whatever you do, they're going to take a piece. Even if you find your own fights or your own sponsorship, they're going to take a part of that. But I'm not going to take any extra money from you. You're not going to go fight for 5 and 5, lose, and have to give me 10 or 20%. I want you to just make as much money as you possibly can because regardless of whether or not this is 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you're Jim Miller. Jim Miller's fighting again, right? It's still fleeting. And hopefully you'll live a long and prosperous life after fighting. And I want you to just make as much money as possible. Like I said to James one day, I was like, one day if you fight in the UFC and make a bunch of money, maybe you can buy me some epinephrine because that shit's expensive. But that's it. If you can afford to fly me out, or the promotion can fly me out, then great. Fly me out. But guess what? If you can't, I'm going to buy my own fucking ticket because I'm not going to not be there. Like, the business will pay for me to go, and then I'll write that off. But I'm like, whatever in the future you want us to do monetarily to say thank you when you have made a bunch of money, hopefully, awesome. But I don't want any of it. And it just makes life since I have done that, it has made life so much easier also because sometimes you got a fighter who's like, I'm not going to pay you for that anymore. because I'm going to do it on my own. And then I don't have to feel bad. We don't have to get into BS arguments. It's just like, cool, pay a monthly membership, take care of what you can take care of based on, finances and whatnot, and make us, make it. Just go fight your heart out and know that every dollar that you have busted your ass to train to make is yours. So that I can only hope that the UFC is taking care of guys that are giving their all to that organization, because without them, it does not exist.
Right. Well, it's like anything, right? The workers don't know how much power they have.
Yeah, right. And everybody wants to fight in the UFC, so there's always going to be someone, right? You're never going to get guys picketing, and crossing lines, and there have been some lawsuits and stuff, but those guys are outside of the sport now. They're not looking to fight, and I don't know if that blackballs their fighters that they may have, so that they look at a camp like, oh, that guy sued us, so your guys don't get to come here anymore. Like, I don't know. I certainly don't want to be a part of anything like that might affect my guys. So I can just hope that they're taking care of people still, whether
How familiar are you with the Ali Act?
I know that they were trying. I know that was coming back in front of courts, but I haven't really done my research on it.
Okay. Do you know what is it? What's the Ali Act in a nutshell? Is it just that fighters are independent contractors?
I'm not even sure.
Okay,
right? Because there is an Ali Act, and now
I don't want to talk on it then, because
yeah,
I'm talking about shite. But that was my understanding. What was the difference with boxing? Is it boxers? Yes, they're signed to promotions. Again, I might be way off here, but they own. They're like independent contractors with that organization.
They're getting 1099s instead of W2s, which I'm pretty sure.
I think that might be what's happening. I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure the UFC is still only giving out 1099s. I don't know if they're doing W2s. You are not a salaried employee. You are a contractor, and I'm pretty sure that's still the case.
That's interesting. Because I actually thought they were employees now, given that that's why they had the uniforms and there was no sponsorships and that. So that's interesting. I don't know. I'm sure someone will
correct us
in the comments. Did you have sponsorships when you were fighting, or was that uniforms?
No, I was pre uniform, so I never had a kit. So, like, I remember when I fought Jason McDonald in Ireland, or Northern Ireland, whatever. Yeah, I guess Belfast City is where we fought. I traveled with my my tube with my banner in it. I had my shorts and my shirt and stuff. I remember actually leaving the banner on the train and fucking nearly freaking out until my friend who was with me, my friend Dave Newborn, one of my longtime black belts and friends and training partners, he ran from the hotel back into the train station. Thankfully, the train was still there. He got up, reached up, and he came running back to me in his flip-flops and shit, or his sandals. That was like it was like a $15,000 banner or whatever it was. I can't remember, but it was. I know there were a lot of logos on all my sponsors, right?
It wasn't because it was the banner; it was because it was sponsorship.
All the people, all the people on it. So that was back when we did those fights. Your corners hung the banner inside the cage, and then you walked back and forth so that the camera would scan back and forth over the banner, and then hopefully you get paid by all those people. And you had your shorts with that you got embroidered and heat pressed and whatnot. So that was me. Remember, my last fight was 2000 for the UFC, was either 2007 or 2000, maybe it was 2008. Maybe was my last fight in UFC. And then I lost outside the UFC, and then I finally got cut. So that was my 4 fights in the UFC. And then some amount of years later was the sponsorships and no more banners and no more things on your shorts and of that nature. But those are big. Made some decent money. There were some fights. I lost to McDonald. I don't remember how much that, if I was on a 10-10 at that point. So I made more in sponsorship, I think, for that fight than I probably made fighting him, since I lost and still show win. I wish that would change. And that's one of the things I still don't quite understand. And again, haven't really asked anybody about it, but boxing is a purse. You win or you lose and you make money. I'm not sure why MMA, and even at the lower levels, for most of MMA at the lower levels, is all show win as opposed to purse. Something I never figured out. I don't know why it's the boxing model in that respect is not the MMA model. Now, there are certainly promotions that if you're a bigger name, you're like, well, this is what you're going to pay me. And it's just flat, but still much of it is show win. And I don't know why. you have any thoughts on why it's so drastically different than boxing in that respect?
No, I don't, but I would like to see a meaningful change. I mean, again, I don't know, so I'm just speculating here. I'd like to see fighter pay doubled, and I'm not. It's unclear to me how much of the actual business that would hurt.
Yeah,
But
especially when you're
because
seeing
I
dudes
don't know the
make millions of
numbers.
dollars, CEOs of companies making, giant salaries. And I get if you run a multi-billion dollar company that you're what we would consider everything is, everything's relative, that your big salary is still a drop in the buckets. But yes, you would like to see fighters get paid more. Uh, and again, maybe they are being paid more these days than they used to be. Like I'm not involved, so I haven't seen what that contender contract looks like. I haven't seen, what after a fighter fights their 3 fights, or whatever but you get signed for contender and now you're in the UFC because they're not the same company. What that contract looks like is that first contract 10 and 10? Is it 20 and 20? And then you at the same time though, if you're on a Mayweather card, let's say back in the day, you're on a Mayweather card, you're one of the first fights on a Mayweather card, you're fighting a 4 rounder or a 5 rounder or whatever it may be, you're not making a lot of money. Mayweather's making a lot of money for sure, but you're probably not making a lot of money now. You're a bigger name, or maybe you're local, whatever it may be, but you're getting paid to a certain amount of money for the rounds that agreed to fight. So I don't know how different that is, but we look at the UFC and we're like, okay, well, they're fighting on a UFC card. They should be being paid more because it's the UFC. But some of those guys fighting on that UFC card have only had 7 or 8 pro fights. Should they really be making that much money? So, I can see both sides of it, but then the guys who are at the top, those guys don't seem to complain. They seem to be making 7 figures. Yeah, 7 figures. Now, should they be making larger 7 figures? I don't know. Are they making really good money in sponsorship because they are at the highest level? Again, I don't know. But you see some of these guys in their cars and their houses, and I know if you go outside and look at my Kia Sorento, and you want to look at how much my mortgage is for the house I'm living in right now, we're not, our bank accounts are not the same.
So that's interesting. So when we talk about, all these complex constraints on systems and whatnot, and we're back to navel gazing. If you made all the salaries tenfold right now, how do you think that would change the quality of the fights and just the skill ecosphere more generally? Because before you say that, I think it's kind of a bit of a tragedy here. Because I think when fighters are getting paid the most, they're probably on the downhill of their career. I
You
see
think?
when they're getting like the bigger names
Okay.
towards the end of the career where they're really making bank. I think
So
maybe
maybe not
they're
that. So
hungry.
maybe they're
Yeah,
they're not at the down yet there, but they're getting towards the precipice.
right. But when they were hungry and they were driven and they were working their ass off and they were fresh and they hadn't accumulated the damage and stuff, that's when they're probably getting paid the least amount.
Yeah, there's
You just mentioned Jim Miller, I'm sure he's getting paid handsomely.
yeah, I mean 40 whatever amount of craziness fights that he's had. It's actually yeah. Uh there's likely some points where they are still young and hungry and on the up that crosses some line where now they're getting paid a little bit more. But I mean, you look at a guy, let's use so what would happen? So let's take it in a couple different ways. So kid who's making 10,000 all of a sudden overnight goes to 100,000 and 100,000. I don't I don't know what that does to the bottom line of the company. And I'm not sure if that
Let, let, let,
changes
let's
much of
forget
anything.
let's forget the bottom line. Let's just say there was a tenfold increase in entry level UFC fighters. Do you think that would change the landscape of who's coming in the sport, who's really
No.
staying in this? You don't. You think fighters are
So,
fighting because they're just want to be fighters?
I mean, okay, so then the question that you're asking is, does it bring in a higher level of athlete if we believe that athletes chase money?
Does it change? Does it meaningfully change how guys fight and who fights? And you can say the other way around. I mean, there's I think about this a lot, right? Maybe Olympians and whatnot. There's some obscure sports that pretty much no one watches. They all get paid fuck all. But these athletes dedicate their lives to it.
Sure. yes, I get what you're saying. So I don't know, because are we talking about this happening system wide?
Yes.
So is this thought experiment saying that now, like my guy James or Alex, who's fighting, so Alex, who's fighting on the 30th, second pro fight, not making a lot of money. He'll likely make more in commissions than, not likely, he will make more in commission selling tickets, because the commission structure is actually pretty, one of the best commission structures in probably in regional fights. So he'll make more money for the ticket sales than he will for winning this fight, right? Uh, so if we all of a sudden say everybody's making more money, that certainly might change who goes into the sports. And it certainly would likely change someone, how they fare in the sport. Because I know that if Alex ends up making 10 times what he's going to make, then that would replace his salary for the job he has. Now, how much it replaces, again, is dependent upon winning and losing, right? That was always one of the things Adam, tried to, losing a fight almost hurts. Again, losing hurts. Don't get me wrong. I never liked losing. And almost after every loss, I was going to quit, because what the fuck? Why do you do this? And then you make such shitty money because you lost half your purse. So losing hurts your pocketbook, sometimes even more than it hurts your pride, because you got bills to pay and shit, people who want your money. So maybe it allows a fighter to dedicate more time, effort, and energy to fighting at the lower levels, and maybe that makes them better faster than a guy who's got to go to work for 7 or 8 hours and then only has so much time to train, because then he's got to go home and get 8 hours of sleep. So maybe it changes the landscape of fighting if everyone, not just UFC, because I don't think that's going to change much if we're not changing the base level, because you still have to go to work and you still need to have health insurance if you're trying to do this smartly. You need to have a job, you need to have health insurance, and you get hurt in a fight and you have a job, you still get to go, you still get to make money. You get hurt in a fight and you don't have a job, well, what the fuck do you do for the next 3 or 4 months? So, like, you got to make a lot of money, or you have to live very Spartan for it all to work out. And until like there's way more money, I just don't think it changed, the landscape changes at the highest levels, if it doesn't change at the lowest levels.
Right. It's such a gamble. But I mean, I would imagine you've been there. You have to have a certain level of delusion, right?
For sure. And we have, as coaches, we have to be able to, I got a guy who was messaging me, who stopped messaging me after a while, because I'm just like, I don't like, you're this old, you have this many kids, you have never done this before. I'm like, I'm just being honest, dude. I'm not want to tell you can't do this thing, but at 38 years old, making your pro debut, like, this is not how you take care of your family, your wife and your family. I'm sorry. So poor business strategy probably, but you have to sometimes help people, like you said, with their delusions. You're a young kid living in Athens, you're working at the bars, you're making a little money, you've got someone who sees some potential in you, so who's willing to sponsor you for a couple months, and like, then you run with it, because at 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, whatever it may be, like, you're young enough to do this thing, and if it doesn't work out, you're going to be okay. I have told a couple of my younger guys, I'm like, listen, you could go get a job, you could go do this thing, and you could say, what if, for the rest of your fucking life. But you're 20 years old or 21 years old, fuck off for a little bit and try this. You're either going to be good at it and it's going to go somewhere, or you're not. And then what is 3 or 4 years of your life at 20 to 25 or even 20 to 30? I had the gym, I had some other things in my life, so it was easy for me to do this. But in 2009, after losing to Brian Baker in Canada, I'd already been cut from the UFC, I think, because I lost another fight. And then I was like, this would be the fight to get me back, and it should have been the fight to get me back, but shit happens because it's MMA. Then the gym opens, and now I'm running like the gym we've been in for now since 2009. I've been teaching in Athens for 30 years, but we've been in this location since 2009. I'm running the gym, and I'm trying to build that as a business, and then that becomes the thing, because I don't now want to go fight for 5 and 5 or 1,000 and 1,000 and take time off from building this other thing that will have a future. So that's like 2009. I'm 30, what, 33? So I'm not that fucking old. But it had seen its course. It wasn't here anymore. I didn't have it here anymore to go put myself through that. Married for a year at that point, I think, as well. So, do all that when you're young. Again, that's why my 20-year-olds, I'll talk into giving some real hard thought to it. But the 30-something-year-old who's like, I'm going to take care of my family by doing this, when you've already got 2 kids, a wife, a job, it's like, no, I got to be honest with you. This is not the place. You think you're going to fight in a year? Maybe, but it might not happen here. It might not happen for 2 years. You might not be pro for 4 years. Now you're fucking 40. Like, dude, this is not the way. I don't want to be a part of that. Maybe that makes me an asshole, but I think that's the right thing to tell someone. You need to find someone else who is going to fast track you, and I'm not going to fast track you.
Yeah, it's a fine balance to crush someone's delusions and foster them. But like you're right, it's different from all, right?
It's not the same. So I'll help a young person if this is what they think they want to do with their lives, and I will do my best to steer them and prepare them for that. But they've got to know, and I'm honest with that. Like, listen, man, it's gonna be tough. I think you should go have a real job. Because unless you're training 8 hours a day, why the fuck don't you have a real job? Get up in the morning and lift, go to work from 8 to 5, come in and train from 6 to whatever, go home, get a good night's sleep and a good dinner, and go to bed and wake up and do this again. At least you'll have health insurance. One of my last amateur fights ended with 19 stitches in my head, like right here somewhere, 2 subdermal, and a doctor touching my skull because I had a full thickness cut in my freaking hairline. Because I took a knee that didn't quite impact. It sheared, and there was a lot of blood. And there was knees to a downed opponent back then, I think, as an amateur. And maybe there were elbows. I can't quite remember. So I'm on my hands and knees being kneed in the head as well, which is fucking absurd for an amateur fight. That was only 3 4-minute rounds instead of 3 5-minute rounds, and I didn't get fucking paid. It's like, that's nonsense. But where that story is going is I showed up to work on Monday with my head all swollen and bandaged to go work my job as a research engineer at the University of Georgia. Now, back then in 2000, that was 2000, right? I think I made that was 2000 and whatever it was, 2001, right? 2001. So I recently graduated from UGA. I was fighting amateur. Adam and I were running the club, still probably at UGA, or we might have moved to our first location, so we might have been running our first gym, or either UGA running our first gym outside of UGA, had some amateurs. This was, again, I think that'd be my last amateur fight. It was the beginning of 2001 or earlier in 2001. By the end of 2001, I'm in South Africa fighting as a pro. Because why the fuck, with the rule set going on in Georgia, why would I continue to fight as an amateur with knees to the head and make no money? This opportunity presents itself in South Africa. Forrest and I go fight in South Africa. His second pro fight, my first pro fight. But I was making back then, I was making 35 to 37 grand living in Athens with no responsibility. Living in an apartment with a roommate, that's what you did. That was easy to do. I could do all of that. And then fought pro for a couple of years until I went on to UF. But again, the fight took care of all that. But I had a job, I had health insurance, I had money, so I could pursue this other thing much more, in my opinion, responsibly. Right? I've always been responsible in that respect. Maybe that's upbringing. Got the engineering degree, so I was working. But yeah, my boss wasn't happy about me coming to work with a giant bandage around my head and shit. Hey, boss, got to fight on Friday or Saturday night. Got some stitches in my head. I'm not really public facing anyway, so get over it. I can still do my job. But that's it's what I tell fighters. You don't need unless you're going to dedicate every hour that you would be working to this thing, which most amateur fighters aren't. Even most low-level pros aren't. Then go get a job and have some health insurance, because if you get hurt in a room, who's going to fucking take care of that?
Actually, you brought up a point there just before we round off, and I wanted to get maybe Mladen, is it Jankovic? I think his name is Mladen, from the chat to talk about, because he's PhD in periodization and stuff. But my guy Finn just came back after a rib injury. I think I mentioned this the other day, and the consensus was he felt sharper.
Yeah, remember that.
Quicker, everything. He just felt better, and he was already really good. And I noticed this thing in me, and I put it out to the group the other day. So you understand what I'm saying, but I'm explaining this for anyone listening. That I used to work for, when I was training and doing my amateur fighting, or just training generally. I was working in offshore oil in Norway, so I'd go away for just over 2 weeks, and I'd come back. So 2 weeks of doing relatively nothing. Maybe I'd work out in the gym and stuff. I'd come back, and I always felt on fire. Always felt just tip top and really sharp the first week back, and this happened routinely. And to the when I threw that out to the group, everyone was kind of saying had similar stories, and I'm curious what's going on there, or we're just telling ourselves a story. I'm
No,
really
I
curious.
don't. I think a certain amount of anecdote is, starts to become something for sure. And I don't, and I think, I mean, there's likely a variety of reasons. I think when I was reading all of that, I don't think I chimed in, but I was reading what everyone had to say. The thing that I think that resonated with me the most was almost the idea of forgetfulness, like we were talking about forgetting certain things. Now, whatever that would be, technically, I certainly don't know. But the idea that when you come back to the room, with time off, I think injuries heal and things heal, and you just physically feel better. So I think there's something to be said about taking time off and letting your body recover. I see that with my son right now, who's 14 and a half, and I just had to buy double XL gloves for him to be a receiver on his freshman football team. The fuck is that about? He's 14 years old and I'm still taller than him. Double XL adult gloves. Big fucking hands. But like watching him overwork himself from time to time because he's gung ho about all of it. Training, lifting, blah, 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 blah. And then him coming back after some time off and feeling better and moving better and performing better. I think that's one part. And I think the other part, maybe we rid our brains of some bullshit, of ways, maybe bullshit ways that we want to do things, or things that have not quite cemented themselves yet because we haven't been in the environment enough to play with them, to make them, I guess the word's embody, right? If we're going to navel gaze, we haven't really embodied certain things yet. So I believe that maybe what it does is just forces us to interact in the problem space with things that we're really comfortable with and good at, so that some of the noise has left. Some of the noise that might have us take other paths that aren't for us as cemented, so that we're really playing the game that in that moment really is what is our A game. Because we've lost a little bit of the B game, or because we've lost a little bit of the B game, we're playing this A game, and then that opens up other avenues that to us in that moment might be novel, so that someone who's our training partner is like, man, you've never done that before. And like, yeah, I don't know where the fuck that came from. It's because your brain is processing things differently because it's left the space, the grappling space or the kickboxing space or the MMA space, whatever it may be, so that your brain is now processing things a little bit differently. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I've nothing to push back on. I'm certainly interested in it, and it's something I want to investigate more. Maybe it's a myriad of things, or maybe it's not happening, and we're just making up a story. There seems to be something there, but I like what you said about the noise, and that might be wildly speculative, and we're maybe bullshit. But I'm interested in and the last point. Then I'm interested in investigating that. For the last point, just say there was some kind of underlying function, and we said, the optimum time to take off and come back and really be at your best is 2 to 3 weeks. You think you could convince fighters to do that?
So after a fight, maybe?
No, no, prior, but coming up to the fight. So you're hard, because what do we do typically, Rory? We beat the fuck out of them just a week out, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll have the last hard session is going to be a week out. And this is kind of industry standard, right?
I don't know, but do you do that?
I would say we're somewhat. I'm trying to always get them to ramp up to game speed. And then the last week or so, I just want them chilling and getting their.
So then that's not the same though. So I don't know if you and I are, I don't know Adam, if Adam's one really putting it all together. I don't know if you and Adam are really beating the shit out of your athletes leading up, because we don't have to beat the shit out of each other to get to game speed.
No, correct. So being the shout there's a bit like that implies a certain kind of recklessness or intensity, right?
Since we're not doing that, maybe you don't need an athlete to take that time off. You would have a hard time having an athlete take 2 to 3 weeks off, but maybe after the fight, and then we don't, they want to be in there, so good luck. But maybe after the fight, that would be an experiment to run with a guy and say, hey, I don't want you to train for the next 2 to 3 weeks. don't sit at home and get all big and fat. Maybe go run and do a little road work and stay in shape, do some lifting, do a little bit of eating, recover for 2 to 3 weeks, and come back and see what happens. You would be hard pressed to have a guy, girl who's actively fighting to probably take that time off, but maybe you could get a guy or girl in a room that's just, more of one of your civilians, but still gets after it. Like we've got guys in a room who probably will never fight, but they want to be in a room and train hard. They like that intensity. They like being a part of the guys getting ready for things. But maybe that's an experiment you can run. Maybe you even keep them close by, but they just don't train. Like, I don't know. You'd have to set up an experiment of some kind. And, what's your controls and what are the variables you're trying to play with. But you said it in that chat. Many others said it in that chat. Many others said it about themselves and athletes that had taken time off and came back. So, again, at what point does anecdote become something worth investigating? I don't know. But there's probably an experiment that could be run. Like you said, you're gonna have a hard time getting your top guys to take that time off.
Well, I think it's another rabbit hole I'm going to go down and try and get someone who might know to talk to me about it. But if there's even a little bit of a less is more phenomenon, I think I'd like to embrace that. Because
Sure.
if we can do a less is more, if we can do because I've spoken about this a lot. I want the minimum effective dosage of head strikes to get good at striking. So that
And then,
maps
yeah.
on well to less is more.
And then, what are other things that maybe we're not getting as much time on, strength and conditioning, things of that nature. Like, what are other things that you could replace that would still have crossover to the cage, to fight night, so that, we're limiting trauma, but still building. I think that would be great. I don't see how that would be I don't see how that'd be a bad thing, how less is more in regards to trauma, head trauma. But also, I mean, the trauma that we put on our bodies, there's, the bumps and bruises, I mean, if you interviewed 100 fighters, at the 100 fighters or so on however many cards, UFC cards you'd have to ask. So there are 15, there are 11, 12 fights. So you've got 24. So the last 5 UFC cards, let's say you get about 100 fighters. If you ask those 100 fighters what their physical and mental state was going into their fights, and 1 to 10, whatever, physically, mentally beat up, whatever you came up with as, how many of them would, be like they were fucked up physically and mentally going into their fights?
Right.
So if you could affect some change in people physically, psychologically, by knowing if less was more, then maybe you're onto something.
Yeah, who knows? We'll finish it off as we usually say. It's complex, right?
It is complex. Didn't we just watch a little thing about complexity science?
Right.
So yeah, it's complex.
All right, my man. I will probably we'll catch up next week, and I'll see you up in Minnesota.
For sure, man. I can't wait.
All right.
Yeah, bro. Talk to you later, dude.
Be well. Bye.
Bye.